Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Today, we are going to talk about something that is fairly near and dear to me because I do actually work as a tutor, as you know. And I don't want you to think that anything I say here is designed to get you to hire me. And I know that might be hard to believe, but it's true. For starters, I don't teach everything, so you couldn't possibly hire me for everything. And while I do want to support, other people who do what I do, um, it, I also want to support parents who don't have huge budgets to pay people like us. So I want to make sure that I give you advice about how and when to hire other people that is going to be useful to you. I wanna make sure you can hear me. I keep messing with my audio stuff. So hang on, let me just get the not that anyone's talking back to me, but just in case. Okay, so I wanna make sure I give you good advice because chances are one of the reasons you're homeschooling as opposed to trying to go out and find a micro school or private school is that, it's a nice thing budget-wise to not have to pay other people to educate your kids, especially when you're perfectly capable of doing it yourselves. But there may come that point in time where you wonder to yourself, should I get help for this? Should someone else be teaching this to my child? How do I know when it's just a momentary bump in the road in our plan? Maybe something to do with the curriculum. Maybe we need to pick a different one. Maybe I need to approach the lesson planning differently. Maybe my child had a bad day. I mean, there could be any number of things. How do you differentiate between that? And I think we've reached a point of diminishing returns on this particular topic, subject, area of interest, whatever it is, and I need help, or I want help. I want help. I'm not having fun with this, and neither is my kid. And this was not supposed to be a thorn in our side. It was, but homeschooling is not supposed to be a bed of roses every moment of every day, but it's certainly not supposed to be painful. What you don't want is your child coming to you and saying, I don't want you to be my teacher for this. And while that might not matter if you have an extremely self-motivated child who's very good at teaching themselves using books or the internet or the library or any number of things, if you have a kid who really responds well to instruction or working with other people and you were that person for a while, then suddenly it's not working, it may not work to just hand them some stuff to do on their own. And you might need a different person. This is actually a lot more common than you think, and it tends to happen more and more the older the child gets. You would think it would be the opposite. You would think that really young kids need a lot of direction, a lot of instruction, but in fact, because very young children tend to be very self-motivated to learn, they love learning new stuff. "Look what I can do." And they love demonstrating their competence. "Look what I can do." So, giving them little projects, little things, little folders full of worksheets or folders full of work to do, reading to do, problems to do, it can be deceptively easy and think, "This is gonna be great. Look at them eagerly gobbling up this work, and they don't need a whole lot of direction." They like when I read to them or read with them or listen to them read or read their stories, they like that, but they don't seem to mind that I'm not standing there instructing them, and they wanna do it themselves. Very, very common. At all levels, by the way, of capability. So even if your child is, moving along at, let's say, I hesitate to use the word, but here it is, slower pace than maybe a sibling in the same subject at the same age, or than their school age peers are doing in school, they'll still be enthusiastic because 'cause they're doing it themselves, and they don't have anything to compare it to, so usually it's okay. When you hit about 10, 11, 12-ish, where there are some psychological, emotional, social things going on because of the onset of puberty, um, it is perfectly normal developmentally for your child to start wanting to pull away across the board. Like, "I want you, go away. Come help me, leave me alone." This becomes very common. And it shows up with homeschoolers pretty frequently when, they are teaching their own kids and they don't, the child doesn't necessarily want to hear from mom or dad on the subject of their learning. At the same time, they want to be taught. They might even say, "I need a teacher." Still doesn't help you pick the teacher or decide if that's the right time, but they might say it. They might say, "You're not a good teacher at this," or "I don't want you to be the teacher," as I said at the outset. It hurts, it stings. I've had it happen, and it's normal. The thing is, it's normal, and not every teacher's style, even if you're not the parent, is appropriate for every kid. There's no such thing as learning styles per se, but there are temperaments. There is such a thing as chemistry. And as I said, when a child is trying to sort of create that healthy distance between their parents and themselves as an individual, this is where it can show up. There's also a greater drive on their part to develop that sense of individual identity socially and interact more with peers more often. So not just with their sport or their, after school-ish activity, or, music or other things. They may want to learn with other people close to their age. Let's just say peers. And it doesn't have to be exactly their age. There's no magic about a specific age, 2-year period. Plenty of kids like to learn with a broader range than that. They kind of like being around other people and want to learn. Some kids are very social, and that shows up even more around this age. So, these are the kind of circumstances where it might start to show up, and it might be a radical departure from what you're used to. So be ready or not. You might have seen it building, wondered what you were going to do, when it was going to reach ahead, like the kid was putting up with doing things on their own or having you be the teacher, and they're getting testier and testier and testier. And you have a choice. Do we sort of muddle through and say, look, this is how it sort of has to be, and I'll try to find some workarounds so that you can do things, online or whatever, but we can't go hire another teacher. That's up to you. But there are times when you should really think about it. So here are those times where I would say give it serious thought. If you have turned over every rock looking for tools, tips, etc., to help your child with a concept they're struggling with, it could be in any subject. It doesn't matter what, but, it tends to pop up the most in math, sometimes in language like grammar, where they're just, like, not getting it, and you're trying all kinds of different things, and for whatever reason, it's just not gelling. They could reach a plateau with reading where they refuse to budge into different genres, different material. They wanna stay all comfy cozy wherever they are. "I wanna read nothing but fantasy fiction, mom." Like, never I'm not touching that classic stuff. And you end up in a power struggle where you're like, you have to. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, you don't. I mean, that's not going to work. And sometimes having another adult or another person or other kids around who are reading those things can be just the right dose of, I hesitate to call it peer pressure, but there's a little something to it that says, maybe it's not so bad. Other people are with me in my pain, or, hey, they like it. Maybe I could like it too. The whole Mikey likes it phenomenon. So those are the times when it might help to start to seek out other options. Um, that's one time when there's a struggle or a power struggle or an understanding struggle. Another time, of course, is when you are ready for the child to learn a subject you know absolutely nothing about, and where you personally, as the adult making these decisions, think it would be really helpful because you don't 100% trust your child to figure it out on their own or follow the textbook and get it from the textbook or even the online, lesson plan to learn a subject that I think they need people for this, a person or people to help and then give me feedback how they're doing and so on. If you want that sort of real life human interaction, this could be things like foreign language, where you're just not satisfied with the online stuff or even a book. They need to hear it or they need to be in a class. This might be higher level math, where you want somebody to teach your child math who loves the maths. That's a big factor, and who deeply understands it so they can really use their own judgment, not like an AI. They can watch your child and kind of suss out, why is the child having difficulty here, possibly even meet with them independently, then have them in class, go over some problems where it might be helpful, but they know the subject upside down and backwards. Things like, pre-calc or, even some kinds of algebra confound people. Um, then you have things where you want your child to benefit from somebody else's point of view or expertise as a role model. This would be art classes, potentially. Art classes, things that are more life skills oriented, whether it's, you know, personal finance or cooking. I mean, now you could teach that yourself, or you might think, I think they might have fun going to a class or watching like a chef prepare something way above and beyond what I do. Or, if they've expressed an interest and you're not sure that like you in your own house have the equipment or the facilities to do the thing. This could be true by the way for labs. You might not want to do bio kitchen labs and dissect a pig at your kitchen counter. It's perfectly acceptable to do that. Lots of families do, but you might think there's a class at the Y where they could do it with other kids. Maybe that's better. So things where you feel like someone else doing it would give them access to better equipment, better materials. You don't have to buy a teacher who's passionate about the subject or is living and breathing that subject every day. Um, or if you're just having those interpersonal conflicts with your child because they just don't see you as the teacher and they want a teacher or they want peers around. Those are the most common situations. And as I said, they tend to start popping up in middle school. Isn't it ironic? The years the kids hate the most, really, in actual school are the years when they're in homeschool and they start to like, you know, wonder, what am I missing? God, I don't want to be with mom all day, or I don't want to be with dad, or I want to go out there in the world. And again, it's not all kids. Some kids are like, I'm perfectly happy to be in my little home with just my mom and just my siblings, and this is great. And it really depends if you have introvert children, extrovert children, if your child is going through fair amount of push me, pull you. This is personality to a large degree, and you cannot predict it. If I look back on my own three children and had to have predicted which one of them would most want to have other teachers and other people around to learn all their stuff, I would have gotten it exactly backwards. Exactly backwards. I would have thought my youngest would be clamoring for that because she's so social and outgoing and loves people and likes to just be out in the world. And my eldest is quite introverted. And I thought for sure, she was going to be happy and content to just, be doing her thing. Exactly backwards. When she reached, let's say, upper middle school, early high school, my eldest was the one saying, I want to try out the public high school. Her dad was pushing it, but she was like, okay, yeah, I want to try it. And within a month, she didn't want to be there anymore. But the main reason she wanted to try it was all the things I said. I want to be around people. I'm not sure I want you as my teacher. I love you, but I don't know. But, it wasn't like conflict. It was just, I don't know if I want that or what am I missing and whatever. And honestly, I think she didn't so much want to go to school as she wanted other teachers, and school was sort of the easiest thing, especially since it meant I didn't have to have a legal war with her dad. And at the time, that's what it would have been. But very quickly, she wanted to leave, and that wasn't allowed. So she had to stay for the year. But as soon as that year was over, she couldn't wait to leave. Then the problem became, okay, I'm out. I don't want to be in school anymore, but I still kind of want some teachers. So I was able at that point to persuade her dad to let me hire some outside teachers. And that is why we use things like High School Math Live, which gives you math teachers, why I used Lukian Project for Latin. So you had a Latin teacher because, quite frankly, I couldn't teach Latin and she didn't want to learn Latin alone. She didn't want to. She's like, I can, but I don't want to. And part of why she didn't want to, and this may crop up in your homeschool as well, is she was pretty honest with herself and she knew she lacked the discipline that a foreign language, especially one as challenging as Latin, would require to learn it well enough. And she wanted to hit milestones. She wanted to be graded. That was going to motivate her. She has ADD and she felt like, I need that, mom. And I don't trust myself to draw those lines in the sand. And it's not that I don't trust you to do it. It's just I'm going to respect another person telling me to do it more. It's just this mental thing. So at least she was honest about it. I said, okay. And that's what we did. And it was a great decision. Both programs were fantastic. She had teachers for these two subjects, and that worked out beautifully. She did the other things that she was perfectly capable of self-serving, English and history and so forth, on her own. And then the next year, she decided, I kind of want some peers to have discussions with about my books, things I'm reading, stuff I'm studying. I want to not just be alone in this. Again, for an introverted kid, I was shocked. So that's when we switched and started using Williamsburg Academy, which is a homeschool academy online. And she started taking more of her classes in that format. Was it perfect? No. I think academically it was upper mid. In other words, much better than public school, probably even better than some private schools. But the materials I'd given her were superior. However, she was happier because she needed that structure and she needed other people telling her what to do. And I would actually chalk that up to how many years she had to spend in public school in between, homeschooling and then homeschooling again. So that may not affect you if you're homeschooling from the start. But it's something to be mindful of, that sometimes kids get in those upper years with all the different things going on and the different stimuli demanding their attention. Even if you control social media, even if they don't have a lot of tech, they still, like, their minds are reeling because they're adolescents. Depending on their temperament, they may need a little more structure. And sometimes having a tutor or a homeschool teacher slash class, whether it's online or in person, can add that added structure that they need. And the beauty of homeschooling is you can decide, is it one class? Is it five? Is it only math? Is it everything? Is it, it's like you can tweak this. Now, in terms of where and who, so we've talked about the when you might need this. And only you can decide when that is, and it might vary from year to year. That's the other beauty of it. You could decide 1 year to do it, and by the next year, the kid goes, "I'm good. I needed it that 1 year for the math stuff. Now I'm over the hump and I'm on my way." If you're only doing 2 years of foreign language, let's say, and they get their 2 years out of the way, equivalent of ninth grade and 10th grade, boom, you're done. I mean, it could be like that. If you're doing this sort of pre-collegiate transcript kind of thing where you have to have foreign language. Um, Now the who and the where. Many options. So many options. So you have the online option where you can do things like OutSchool and find a very specific class and browse around the teachers, read reviews, see who gets high reviews, select people who are geared towards homeschooling. That would be my recommendation, rather than public school enrichment or public school teachers making extra bucks, unless you pick up that philosophically you're really strongly aligned, because a lot of times that is what it is. It's extra bucks for public school teachers to do enrichment. So, you know, look into their background, do some research on them. And, if you find something you like, it's very well reviewed, then, go that way. That's really good for things like English class electives, specific genres that you can't get your kid to read. Like, I want them to study poetry, but I can't seem to get them to do it. Okay, that could be great. Have a poetry class with something like OutSchool or whatever. Um, OutSchool does have the benefit of kind of come in, go out with, very flexible scheduling and just thousands and thousands of teachers to choose from, as well as price points. A step up from that, and I list some of these in the resources in our Discord at the moment, and eventually they'll all be on the website, is going to a program like Lukian.org, which has classics in all areas, history, literature, logic, math, writing, grammar. So lots of different offerings, Latin, Greek. And you can decide, let's try some classics through the classicists. Let's do it that way. Not your inexpensive option, but top of the crop. I mean, absolutely the best. Another one that is way up there, especially if you have kids who are gifted and talented and need to be challenged and pushed hard, would be to go through World Fireworks Press. They have classes that your children can join. They also have some curriculum materials you can do at home that are more challenging than what you might be used to for very specific niche topics. And maybe your child will be inspired to do it on their own if they take a look at these materials that are out of the ordinary. But they do have classes and they do have teachers. And again, not your budget option, but If you've been doing everything yourself all these many years and now you want to make an investment, might be worth it. Might be worth it for that one class or those two classes where they really want to be challenged and pushed by somebody other than you. And another option is Well Trained Mind has an online school. Now it's a mixed bag, Well Trained Mind. Susan Wise Bauer has personally gone a little progressive in some of her views. So you have to read the bios of the teachers, you have to read the curriculum and be selective. My daughter's been doing Spanish through them, not by my choice, but again, by her dad. It's been adequate, but I'm not a giant fan of the language program. I think it would be better for things other than foreign language. For foreign language, I would suggest doing things like, self-serving a little bit more, or perhaps Rosetta Stone, or, like that for the self-serve. I really like Pimsleur. I really do. I keep getting notifications. I don't know if you guys can hear them, but I keep getting notifications from the Discord, and I don't know if they're for me. So I'm gonna just check them out. I don't think so, but boy, do I get a lot of notifications from my Discord. I'm gonna close it out. All right, so locally, you would probably be able to find more foreign language options. Somebody who speaks Spanish, somebody who speaks a foreign language. See, check your local listings literally for tutors and so on. You don't necessarily need a class every single day. So maybe you find something in the off days, the off hours. And this is where a public school teacher who teaches Spanish or French or something, they might be the perfect person to go to for this. So consider it. Um, there might even be some local things in your community, depending where you live, where they are teaching foreign language to the kids. So check into it, especially with Spanish. I think it would be easier to find, especially if you live in an urban area. Now, what I want to caution you about, depending on where you live, is it will matter who you hire if you're going to hire a person to teach a core class. So, in other words, if you live in a state that requires you to keep detailed records and transcripts and so on of every course hour that you teach in those core classes. So it's not obviously an extracurricular, right? It's not an elective. It's ELA for, whatever grade. In some states, places like even Alabama, homeschoolers are required to be doing the teaching. It's like imply that you're the one doing the teaching. And if you have someone else doing it and you expect to put that on the transcript, that person needs to be certified in the state. Now, thankfully, I don't live in a state like that, but you need to check if you do. So if you're going to hire somebody to be the teacher, produce the grades, produce the transcript for your child in that subject, you have two choices. One of which you didn't hear from me. One is you add it to the transcript and put the grades in, and you don't mention where they took the class. Make it like you did it at home. You didn't hear that from me. Or you go ahead and let the other person put it in and put in all the details and so on and so forth. And they need to have the proper credentials that align with your state. Your choice. Some of the online programs are preferable for this because they automatically give you this. So for example, whether if it's Lukian or High School Math Live or places like Williamsburg, where by the way, you can buy a one-off class in some subjects, you can just go and take English in some of these homeschool programs. You definitely can with Well Trained Mind too. Um, you can, you know, use their materials and they're already quote unquote accredited, or their teachers are already de facto licensed. So read the fine print and that might be a deciding factor. Like, no, I'm not going to hire this local person who goes to my church to teach Spanish because my state requires that the Spanish foreign language teacher for the foreign language requirement to meet my state requirements must be certified teacher. It's a dumb law. But if they have that in your state, I don't want to give you bad advice and tell you, oh, just go hire somebody and all will be well. It might not be. And I don't want you to get in trouble. As far as those transcripts, if you're maintaining your own transcript and you hire different people to do things. Let's say you live in a very free state like I do. I mean, and ironically, North Carolina is so not free in so many ways, but homeschooling wise, we really are. And I don't have high school distribution requirements. It's really up to me and whether I want my child to go to college or not. And then the colleges, I have to cater to what the college would want. Um, so what I put in the transcript is what I put in the transcript to say you've graduated high school. I do have there are attendance laws and there are credit hours expectations to graduate high school. But in terms of how they're distributed, how many English classes, how many, they put in recommendations, but they can't penalize me or her if she didn't get them. That said, I'm going to go ahead and pretty much mirror what the pre-collegiate ones would be at the basic level, because why wouldn't I? I mean, she might change her mind someday and want to go to college. And, just because she doesn't right now, I don't want to hamstring her and make it impossible. But I'm writing all the course descriptions. I'm putting in all the information. If you hire somebody, one of the things you should be asking for in the price of admission and the price of the course is that they're going to give you a course description. They're going to give you grades. They're going to give you rubrics. They're going to give you things to let you know how they evaluated your child and your child's proficiency in the subject so that you can add that to your transcript. If they're not going to do that, it should be priced accordingly. They should be charging you purely for the hours. That's it. Like, it's an hour of my time for X amount. You do the rest. Now, the upside of that is that might make you able to like squeak through the legal requirement. Because in that case, you're not really hiring a teacher or tutor so much as just kind of like, I don't know, a warm body to help you sort of thing. It's weird. But the minute you observe someone else was the teacher and here's the course description and here's the grading and these are the grade, then you have to declare, you're going to have to explain where that came from or you're straight up lying. You probably could, and again, full disclosure, I would, but I'm a rebel. If you're concerned about that, or that they audit and they check these things, then consider just a tutor. Consider just a person presenting information or, teaching, but maybe you provide the materials. By the way, that's how I work. So the way I work is so I can reach people in the broadest number of states. I have certain curriculum materials that I prefer to work with. And I tell people this is what I offer right off the top. These are the curriculum materials that I use for sort of fifth grade and above, for English, for writing, for history, for civics and logic. The parents are responsible to buy the materials. So that kind of keeps them in the clear. I'll provide sort of written notes to the extent that they want them about how sessions went. I'll, give them details about how things are going. And then they can choose. Do you want me to grade? Do you want to grade? If they give the grades, they're totally in the clear. They really are. They pick the materials. They pick the grades based on my notes, based on taking a look at the papers that the kid wrote under my direction. They're the master teacher in charge. I'm just kind of the warm body presenting the material, teaching the material, but it kind of is that gray area. That's part of why I do it that way. And sometimes parents come to me and say, can you use this curriculum instead? Now, I'm not going to agree to any old random curriculum. If I don't think it's a good one, I'll say so. But sometimes if it's like, well, sure, it's no skin off my nose. That's what you want me to teach. I'll teach that. And I'll even have the parent say, I want them to do lessons 1 through 5, skip 6 and 7, go to here, this is what I want them to do. They're not responding to me. And I need somebody like you to, help me out. No problem. So I'm sort of between a tutor and a teacher. And I'm not the only person around who does this. There are lots and lots of people. You can go do a Google search. You can ask around in your community. There are lots of people who do these sort of things for precisely this reason. They want to offer them their services to homeschool families, but they also want to give you the flexibility that you're still the teacher. It's still under your control. And you could still report to the state that you taught this class, but you got a little help doing it, if you get my drift. So just make sure you understand the rules and the expectations of your state. The next thing you're going to need to do is take the time, and this is very frustrating for me as a tutor. This is why I'm presenting it to you. Take the time to get to know the tutor. I have so many parents hire me on word of mouth. It's very flattering. Okay. But they don't sit with me. They don't ask me any questions. They don't get to know me. I don't get to know them. I don't get to ask them much about their life and what goes on. And I don't want to pry, but just can you tell me how many hours my student is spending studying this stuff and reading? What's the space they have like to study, and what are the rules if they don't do we're supposed to be a team. We're supposed to work together. I'm not just a hired hand and I'm not a babysitter. And that would be true of any teacher or tutor that you hire or any program that you go to. Um, Even if you go to an organized program like Williamsburg, avail yourself of the opportunities for office hours or anything with the teacher to meet them and say, hi, I just wanted to, get to know you. And, there's the background checking, but then there's also just building a rapport so that that person will come to you if they sense something's off or they feel like the parent needs to get more involved than just outsourcing it. So get to know them. Take the time to get to know them and let them get to know you. Make sure they know any little idiosyncrasies or things that are going on. And if something comes up, God forbid a pet dies, grandma's sick, dad's been out of town for a long time, things are going on, share that information with the teacher or the tutor so they're not flying blind if your child is having some kind of issue. This is, again, an advantage of homeschooling over public or private schooling is they're trying to read stuff into your kids and they send your kid to the counselor and, all hell breaks loose. You don't need to worry about that. I have absolutely no legal authority over you or over anybody. Neither does any other teacher or tutor. So you have a little more leeway to just establish that rapport and relationship. You also have more leeway in terms of scheduling. So if something comes up or vacation comes up or whatever, just be very upfront at the outset with whomever you're hiring or whatever course you're taking. Make sure it aligns with your family's lifestyle. The more one-on-one you hire, like a person like me, the more flexibility you have. It's like 24 hours notice, right? I mean, within reason, we'll be doing this every week. You sign up for a class, it's like school. They're not going to change their schedule because of you. And they might have a recording of the class to watch if you're out of town. They might not. So investigate that. How much are you going to be able to stick to a schedule? And then the next thing is establish some ground rules with your student, with your child. You are still the boss. You are still the chief administrator, head of school, homeschool, head honcho, everything, and parent. Even if they have another teacher teaching them something. It is not a great idea to get into the triangulation situation with the teacher that you've hired or tutor that you've hired against your student if you have ground rules at home for how much they need to study or how well they need to do or how respectful they need to be, et cetera. There's only so much of a bad guy that the hired teacher or tutor can be. And one of the things I respected so much about the people at Lukion is this is a standard they set that not only helped me be a better homeschooling parent, but I think helped my daughter be a better homeschool student taking an outside class. They absolutely categorically would not jump in between debates about homework being done or not done. They just wouldn't do it. It was like, this is the work. This is the due date. You have X amount of grace period to get it in. If you miss it, it's a zero. It's a zero. That's the policy. Mom can't intervene, dad can't intervene, nobody intervenes. That's the policy. So then it becomes just mom and the child or dad and the child, or whoever and the child dealing with, did you do it or didn't you do it? It's not, there's no, can you give them that's the policy. That's it. So you should actually look for people who are willing to do that, like hold a hard line. So they're not the one sitting there debating with your child, like, well, okay, I'll give you it's written down in the beginning. There it is. And you shouldn't be asking them for that either, like for leeway and so forth, because that's really up to you guys. You are the head of school, head of household. That doesn't change. So I love that they were so firm about that so that my authority as a parent was not undermined by somebody going, oh, I'll cut you some slack. How am I going to then get my daughter to do what she needs to do if she knows in the back of her mind, oh, well, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. Fisher's just going to let me have an extra time. That was a problem I ran into with a couple of people at Williamsburg. That was one of my complaints. Is it was too much like school in the sense of like, well, we didn't want to be a bad guy. Thanks a lot. Now I'm getting thrown under the bus because I don't want them being late on their assignments. This is starting to stack up. And now I have an entire weekend of a kid stressed out trying to get late assignments done. So thanks so much for your giant grace period that they've exploited to the nth degree. And now I'm the big bad meanie for holding their feet to the fire to get it done. So I much prefer very strict. This is the deal. If it's not in, it's late, especially when they're doing the grading. Now, if you're doing the grading, that's up to you, but establish those rules and guidelines up front. So I have other students where I don't do any grading at all. I am just the presenter, the tutor, et cetera. I write notes to the parents. I said, this is where they are. This is what they've done. This is what they didn't do, whatever. Suit yourself. It's like no skin off my nose if you don't even give them a grade at all for this whole thing. I'm just here teaching them information, teaching them material. And then it's totally up to them. And half the time I don't even know about it. Like the kid doesn't even come back and go, mom gave me a C or mom gave me a 0 or whatever. I don't hear anything about that. The only time it ever happened was when I wrote notes back saying, Junior didn't do the work at all and was unprepared today. So we had to come up with something else to do. Then I heard about you told my mom. Then I said, yes. And that was the agreement up front. I have to tell your mom what goes on in class because that's why I'm here. So you weren't prepared and we had to double up and spend a whole session doing something that we were supposed to move on and we couldn't. So yeah, I had no choice. But again, I'm not the bad guy in that situation. The trouble he got into was with mom. So just establish what those ground rules and expectations are. It's going to be different for every single family. And you can work with the tutor or the teacher or the program about what do you recommend for this kind of work, for this kind of syllabus. And they might have recommendations. I do. I mean, I give people recommendations. And those recommendations are a lot more useful and applicable to your specific home if you take that time to meet with the tutor before your child starts working with them, or meet with the teacher before they start going to the program. If they have an orientation, show up. Can't tell you how many people, even homeschool families who are in charge of this, don't show up for orientation sessions for things like Lukian and high school math. So they're not familiar with the technology that the student's using. They're not familiar with the rules and expectations. They've not met the teacher and got to know what she's about, what her expectations are, what her personality is like, et cetera. They just are like, you come highly recommended and my child doesn't learn from me, so here, and they sign up. I understand that most homeschool parents are a little more hands-on than that, but just in case you were thinking you didn't need to be because you were outsourcing, no, you need to be just as hands-on as if you were doing it yourself, if not more so. Make sure you know cancellation policies, refund policies, grading standards, all the things before signing on the dotted line. And if there is a placement quiz, test, et cetera, that goes with it, or you think there should be and there isn't one, take that into account. So ask them how they assess your child to make sure they're at the right level, because that can be tough. If you go to hire a teacher and say, I think my child's at the beginning level, and then you say, okay, sure, let's start. But actually they're not. They're even like at they're a level before beginning, or you think they're intermediate and they really should go backwards. Talk that through. Ask if you can have, a meeting to assess how they're doing, to figure out the proper placement. Most very organized programs have placement quizzes and tests that you can use, but individual tutors do not. I do not. So when a parent is not sure if a particular curriculum is correct for their child, I suggest a meeting. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is, because courses and programs have a flat fee. Like, this is the price. This is what it is. You show up day one, come to the orientation. We'll give you that, and read our materials thoroughly and look at our placement tests. And that's all included in the price. When you hire an individual person like me or a teacher in your neighborhood or whatever, you should expect to pay for their time, like each individual hour that you spend with them. So unless you are buying a full price, like a semester course, it costs X amount and you get this many weeks and you get, feedback and so on, you should expect to spend a per hour rate to sit and talk to them about things, to have them sit and talk to your child about things. It's not going to be for free. And why would it be? Because you may decide not to hire them. You may sit that you say, "Hey, this has happened to me." I've had people sit and meet with me, and their child meets with me, and we talk, and so on and so forth. And the child concludes after meeting with me that not only did they not want to work with me, but they didn't want to work with any teacher, that they were wrong. We're like, on second thought, mom, I'm going to do this myself. Like they just thought it would be cool to have a teacher, and then they thought better of it. They didn't want to do it. So they didn't learn nothing. They learned something important about themselves, about, what they really wanted. So did the parent. Of course they need to pay for my time. I didn't get anything out of it, right? So the same thing goes with they decide they do want to use me. Now, I have a policy where I apply a percentage of that to future, work if they decide to work with me for a minimum amount of time because I think that's sort of fair. But if they don't, no, of course you're going to pay for that time. And I can't tell you how many people are like, I have to pay you for an interview. And I'm like, yes, you do. It's my time. So expect that. Don't be surprised. This is not a lucrative career. And there are a lot of people who kick tires. There are a lot of people who think like maybe I want to hire somebody and they would use up your time just chatting with you you have to charge for it. So there's that. Finally, I would say whether or not your child ever comes to you and says, I want someone else, or it ever occurs to you based on friction, give serious thought over the course of your homeschooling years to hiring other people or enrolling them in classes, because you really can sometimes gain access to interesting experiences they wouldn't otherwise have. What come to mind for me are those extra like elective type subjects, art classes, drawing, painting, pottery, even science classes. My kids, when they were homeschooled, when they were in elementary school, were signed up for a science program. They were classes. It wasn't just, hey, let's go on a nature walk. With our local Parks and Rec, nature center, but they had teachers. They had actual science teachers, researchers, et cetera, teaching these classes. And my kids absolutely loved them. They got so much out of them. It was a little bit social too. There were other kids and they did go on nature walks, but they learned about geology. They learned about animals. They learned like some ornithology and birds and how to identify birds from different feathers. They learned about habitats. They learned a little bit of ecology, about just all kinds of different things to do with the natural world in a perfect elementary science program across a year. And it was so inexpensive because it was done with our local nature center. It was pennies. Truly. I think it cost me like $75 for the entire semester. That's nothing. So yes, tax dollars are paying for part of it, but look for these opportunities. Had I not looked for it, had I not decided, I think it'd be, I don't want them to learn science like inside the house. And I lived in a subdivision and we didn't have a yard really at the time. It was just like a little patch of grass. And I'd have to physically get in the car and take them places, which I could do. But I didn't think I had the ability to give them the rich experience that they could get with someone who was truly a pro, like lived and breathed, nature and science and all these things. And I'm so glad I did that because that was one of the highlights of their homeschooling elementary curriculum was doing the science through Reedy Creek Nature Center. So I'm glad I did that. The same goes for the homeschool PE class that we found. Now, most people are like, PE? You don't need to do that if your kid does a sport. You're absolutely right. If your child is very active in a sport, an organized sport, it could be martial arts. It doesn't have to be like a team sport necessarily. But if they're not, and my kids were not, I tried. They were just not interested. We tried taekwondo. They did 2 years of taekwondo. They're like, they didn't want to keep doing it. They tried soccer at their dad's insistence, didn't want to do it. So by the time we get to the upper elementary grades, it was like they don't want to do any organized sport. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I found through the Y a homeschool PE class just so they would get out and move and like do things. Because if your children are not super athletic and they don't want to do a sport, that's like the one sport, then you still have to find a way. Not because it's required, Not because PE is required in North Carolina, blah, 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 although it is. I mean, not for homeschoolers, but it is in the, whatever, in the public schools it is. So I didn't do it for that reason. I did it because I thought my kids during the day need to run around and they need to run around with other kids. And you sort of age out of park days. I took them to park days as long as I possibly could. And when your kids are the oldest ones at park days, it's very often like preschool and real itty bitty kindergarten age kids who are at the park. And then I felt like, no, they need to be playing like basketball, dodgeball, volleyball, tag, like doing more stuff. So the Y had a homeschool PE, and that's what we did. And that worked out perfectly. So sometimes it can be for that reason. Look at your lifestyle, look at where you live. What are we missing? What is really hard to do ourselves? And see if you can outsource that, because sometimes you can. And I'm glad that I did. It also got us out of the house as a group. We tended to be, there 3 out of 4 of us were hardcore introverts. So staying in the house all day was not hard. We didn't really feel bad about it. And, it was only my youngest at the time who was like, I gotta go somewhere. And now it's flipped around. As I said, I've got a 15-year-old who's perfectly content most of the time to be in her room doing her homework on her own. And she goes to co-op once a week, and that's sufficient. She calls her friends and they organize stuff to do on their own when they feel like it. But she doesn't seem as social as she is. She doesn't seem to have this like daily need to like go be with people. Whereas my eldest, I think the only reason she's in college against my better, against my judgment and my wishes is friends. It's a very expensive way to make friends, but I honestly think that is her number one reason. Because she doesn't even go to class half the time. She does it online, but she's still in college. So she could be on a campus. I don't even get me started. Anyway, maybe next year she'll change her mind, at least come home, live at home, have free rent, and then, go to a campus locally and have that, but for literally half the price. It's the rent that's costing so much money. Anyway, that's pretty much the topic. I hope this helps you decide. The bottom line is there are really good reasons to hire other people sometimes to augment your homeschooling experience. Consider them, look into them, do all your research with the same intensity that you research the curriculum or curricula that you use. Research those people, research their offering. Ask lots of questions, get to know them, and it can be a wonderful, rich experience. Remember, homeschooling doesn't necessarily mean school at home, like inside your house. And it doesn't always mean you're the only teacher either. It's really just home directed, parent directed education. And that can be something unique to your family and your children, even amongst siblings. And that's the beauty of it. That's really one of the best things about it, in my view, is that you can like customize every last little bit of it. So I hope that helps. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on Friday for yet another topic. Have a good rest of your week.